Greetings from Accessible Fellowship. My name is Peter Albright, and I am Accessible Fellowship's Bible study facilitator. Last week we talked about head coverings for women in Paul's Rome. Again, we discussed the obligation that Christians have to sacrifice personal freedom for the sake of others. This week, on May 11th, the topic is how not to eat the supper of the Lord. Primary text is 1 Corinthians 11, and the stated purpose is to discern how the rigid class structure of Greco-Roman culture influenced the Lord's Supper in Corinth, and to break down cultural barriers that affect our observance of the Lord's Supper. That is from our textbook by Halteman Finger, page 62. A pattern is developing. We should avoid exercising our own freedom if doing so might trip somebody else up. This week we're talking about communion. In our last series by Lee, in January 19th of this year, we talked about communion being the center of worship, and we talked about the 4 Passover cups. Much further back, in October of 2020, on October 25th of 2020 to be exact, in our study by Carol Dirksen, we had a lesson entitled, I Have Yearningly Yearned. That week stands out in my memory because it was the week that the class decided, after a period of discernment, to continue with the Salt and Light curriculum. That was almost 5 years ago. Quite a bit of water has gone under the bridge since then, hasn't it? In that lesson, almost 5 years ago, we talked about 6 names for communion. We talked about the Lord's Supper, the Lord's table, the breaking of the bread, communion, the Eucharist, and the love feast or agape feast. Since then, I have added a 7th name, which is divine liturgy, terminology often used in the Orthodox Church. We did talk at that time about the different beliefs about communion. Catholics typically believe in transubstantiation, where the elements are actually transformed into the body and blood of Christ, and that once they have been sanctified, they remain sacred. I'm sure that a Catholic theologian would find my description simplistic, and I apologize. The Lutheran belief would probably be similar to the Catholic belief, but there is some different terminology, and my understanding is that the elements are not treated as if they are the actual body and blood of Christ after the period of communion is over. The Orthodox Church considers what happens at communion an unexplained mystery, the divine liturgy. Reformed and Presbyterian traditions would say that Christ is perhaps not physically present, but spiritually present during the communion. Those in the radical Reformation tradition, such as Anabaptist, consider communion to be a remembrance, a reminder, not so much a sacrament. Now, as we read in 1 Corinthians chapter 11, Paul seems to be describing something that would be much like an agape feast. It is, very possibly, a gathering at the end of each day for a communal meal. Think about the commonality of the root word communion. Communion, communal, community. The lesson reminded me of a non-denominational communion that was held at our local high school football field a number of years ago, and it was truly a blessed experience. I really appreciated that and wish that it had been able to continue. Rita Halteman Finger highlights how that daily agape feast might have addressed issues of social and economic justice back in Paul's day, back in the first century. I'd suggest that students and instructors spend extra time studying Halteman Finger's section entitled Cultural Realities. This lesson challenges us to think of how we can achieve the same goals of social and economic justice here in the 21st century. I cannot think of a better way to show the love of Jesus to the world. Join me this week in praying for spiritual revival, a revival marked by revival of love for God and love for our neighbors. Go in peace.